Good morning, everyone. We have a very special guest joining us today. It is my bestie and best-selling author, Joyce Vance. It is an hour earlier in Alabama at the moment, so Joyce will be joining us at 9:30 our time, 8:30 hers. Anyhow, I want to begin the show with some breaking news. For some crazy reason, Donald Trump, at a press conference yesterday afternoon, announced that the United States had seized an Venezuelan oil tanker. Let's take a look at what he said, and let's get Adam Schiff's reaction to that.
Well, thank you very much. It's been an interesting day from the standpoint of news. As you probably know, we've just seized a tanker on the coast of Venezuela, large tanker, very large. Largest one ever seized, actually. And other things are happening, so you'll be seeing that later, and you'll be talking about that later with some other people.
What the actual hell? Now, of course, we do need to get to Adam Schiff's reaction, but I'd like to first share Ben Collins, editor of The Onion, who also goes by the name Tim Onion, a big clapback or a big a reference to when, in his first term, Donald Trump referred to the CEO of Apple as with the last name of Apple. It was really, he referred to him as Tim Cook as Tim Apple. So I think that is probably why Ben has chosen that name. But let's look at what Ben Collins, sometimes people who share satire with us are those who cut to the chase. We don't have to pretend we don't know what this is about. Here's what Ben had to say yesterday. People keep wondering why they're going after Venezuela. It's because they want to do regime change and control its oil, then use a big tract of land there to keep a tax-free, quote unquote, network state that looks like Dubai, but operates like Rhodesia. They are saying this out loud. Believe them. Okay, let's turn now to Adam Schiff, Senator Adam Schiff of California, reacting to this, because there are a lot of problems with what I just told you about the United States seizing a Venezuelan oil tanker. And so I thought maybe we should get, a U.S. senator, not just a talking head who talks at you every morning from my living room, to explain what the F is going on here. Okay, let's do it.
Let's talk about this seizing of a Venezuela tanker. Your reaction?
Well, deep concern over it. It would be one thing if this was simply an operation to seize a tanker that's trying to evade sanctions. We want to make sure that oil is not going to Iran in violation of sanctions. But if this is part of a run-up to the war, the potential war with Venezuela, and a lot of the other excuses just don't seem to add up. We've been told that the strikes on these boats are about narcotics. We've been told that that this is about immigration, and now we're being told this is about oil and sanctions. What it really seems to be about, Alex, is regime change. And if that is the case, they have no authorization from Congress to go to war with Venezuela in order to change the leadership there. And it's also bewildering at the same time because the president just pardoned the corrupt former president of Honduras for drug running. So something doesn't add up, but the American people don't want us to get into another war, this time with Venezuela.
So if there was a congressional vote to authorize a war with Venezuela for regime change, would you vote no?
I would vote no. We don't need to go to war to change the leadership there. Now, hey, Maduro is a bad actor. He's a murderous dictator. He's an illegitimate leader of that country. That is not to say anything positive about Maduro. I think he's awful. But do we want to go to war to change the regime there? No, I don't think so. And it just, as I said, doesn't add up when we pardon one criminal former leader of a country, and now we're going to use all of this military force to depose another. I just don't understand. What's the strategy? What's the plan? What's the policy? None of it really makes sense to me.
I just interviewed your colleague in the Senate, Tim Kaine, who told me that he thinks that these strikes are illegal. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. In fact, Tim and I have now introduced a couple war powers resolutions to put an end to these, to make sure that we're not drawn into an unintended conflict or an intentional one.
Okay, so
I'd do anything.
let's just talk about that. I'm confused because I'm not an expert on why, if there are sanctions from the U.S. To supply oil to Iran, why that would entitle us to seize a Venezuelan ship. However, this is not my area of law. I will just say, like Adam Schiff, I'm not buying it. They're using every excuse in the book to engage in regime change and seize the oil. You might remember years ago when Donald Trump was when he was on the campaign trail in 2015, and he was criticizing the Bush administration for the war in Iraq, and not so, saying that not so much his criticism wasn't that it was a useless war, but it was more like, why didn't we just go take the oil? Do you remember that? So I think Donald Trump, just like when he began this second administration, saying he wanted to take, he was going to take Greenland, and he was also going to take Panama, and he was going to invade Canada. Well, those things didn't go over well. So now his plan is Venezuela, because people don't really like Maduro as much as they used to like, let's say, they like Mark Carney. He seems like a normal, democratically elected, decent guy, smart, used to be head of the Bank of England. He is the prime minister. People also liked Justin Trudeau enough, even if some people didn't like his policies. They are no Maduro. So this is his perfect moment to go to war. It's still on my mind that the thing that he said to Zelensky, Vladimir Zelensky, Ukrainian president, in the Oval Office, saying, why haven't you had elections? And Zelensky's response was, we're at war. Essentially, how could we have secure elections when Russia is attacking us constantly, right? And by the way, one second. So Donald Trump's response was, well, if we're at war, maybe we can't have elections. Guys, this man will do anything to stay in power, and will do anything not to release information that would be damaging to him and the cronies who are benefiting from his authoritarianism and his corruption. They're getting their little piece of it, and they don't really care about the rest of us. Now, speaking, my friends, of trying to hide things from us, let's talk about the full video from September 2nd. The full video, not just the initial strike against the fishermen who were apparently or allegedly carrying cocaine, not to the United States from Venezuela, but south to Suriname. Remember when we looked at that map? The U.S., if you're in Caracas, Venezuela, the northern part of South America, to get to the United States, you would have to navigate northwest. To get to Suriname, you just navigate southeast. They were headed to Suriname, right? That's what we know. At any rate, and my feeling on this, that this is either outright murder or a war crime. I'm leaning more toward the murder, because I do not see a reasonable justification to treat drug traffickers as enemy combatants. But even if a deranged Supreme Court majority could see that, there's no question in my mind that murdering the two fishermen who were clinging on the smoldering remains of this boat as they were surrendering is a war crime. So we've been through this, we've talked about this and my reasoning on this. But now we're at the point where Hegseth, well, Donald Trump promised, let's say, to release the full video. He said he'd be happy to do it. And then when a journalist asked him about it the other day, he said, well, I never promised that. Fake news, essentially. Well, no, we can play the tape, and I'm sure you've seen before Trump did. Now he's saying, oh, it's up to Hegseth. Well, Hegseth ain't going to release evidence of war crimes because war crimes, as we talked about, are punishable, not just punishable in U.S. courts, right? War crimes are also punishable via court-martial. So in both cases, depending on the nature of it, it can include imprisonment and up to even the death penalty for this type of war crime could include, right, if guilty, all the way down the chain of command. So that is what, and the reason why they don't want to release this video. Now, footnote here, or put a pin in this. No one is going to The Hague. The United States is not a signatory to the International Criminal Court. So if, as much as everyone thinks this is going to be, like The Hague and like, other war criminals across the world, that ain't going to happen to Hegseth or anyone down that chain of command. But we have our own courts. And just so you know, even if these people leave the military, whether they're brought in to be court-martialed or just charged in U.S. courts, there is no statute of limitations on this kind of murderous war crime. But of course, there is the pardon power. Okay, let's go though. But let me just say, will Donald Trump pardon these folks? We'll get to that in a moment. Now let's listen to the reasoning that we are now hearing from Trump supporters. And this is, you're going to hear right now from the chair of the House Intelligence Committee, a member of the Gang of Eight. And he is trying to come up with a plausible reason why they won't release the second half of the video, the part that shows the murder of these surrendering fishermen. Let me play what he has to say, and we'll talk about that on the other side.
Is growing on the administration to release the unedited video of the first strike on the alleged drug boat off the coast of Venezuela. Several Republicans are joining Democrats calling on its release. Trump has said it's up to Hegseth to decide whether to release it. This is a reversal of sorts. He first said it should be made public. What did Hegseth tell you in the briefing? Are you confident that he will release this as so many in Congress want him to?
Well, I think what we have to do is understand first, I don't think we should release the unedited video. And that is to say that, look, there are some sources and methods that, well, because I'm going to explain that. Because of sources and methods, what the trained eye can detect from these videos may reveal sources and methods that would imperil those troops that are undertaking this action. So they have to make sure that what they do release passes the standards of classification review that don't reveal sources and methods that could imperil those actions and those individuals carrying out those orders.
Okay.
So can we produce a video and release that to folks that satisfy their curiosity about the legality of those strikes? Probably so, but it's not going to happen overnight without a thorough review that protects sources and methods.
What an absolute hot bucket of crap that is. They released the first part of that video. If that didn't reveal sources and methods, what would have? These folks are dragging their feet because they don't want us to watch their snuff film. They wanted the version where they could go in and say, these folks are narco-terrorists, and somehow the cocaine that was headed to Suriname is killing Americans. Okay? Which is implausible and also not a justification for murdering them in the first place. But they could show, because it was a boat blowing up like it was a video game. But when you see, or we would see, the close-up of people surrendering, desperate for their lives, and then being murdered, that ain't gonna fly. And as I heard someone say the other day, think about who these fishermen would be, whether or not they're drug couriers. These are not at the top, most well-connected, privileged ranks of society. These are ordinary people, probably desperate for their lives. In some cases, not all, but in some cases, these are people whose families have been threatened unless they take part in the drug trade. That is why so many people leave countries as become refugees in the first place. Now, some of them may just be, this is how I am earning a living. But earning a living through trafficking cocaine is something that Donald Trump applauds if you are super wealthy, right? For example, the former president of Honduras, who he sprung from a U.S. prison after he was sentenced just this spring. Now, the funny thing happened after Donald Trump did that, right? So the president of Honduras, Orlando Hernandez, who Donald Trump freed from prison last week, I'm sure that you heard the really interesting news that Donald Trump may think he is the king of America, and so does the John Roberts corrupt majority on the Supreme Court. However, that is not how the world sees Donald Trump. He is a buffoon, and his pardon means nothing to the officials in Honduras. Juan Orlando Hernandez, as you may know, is now there. He is under. There was an international arrest warrant issued for this former president. So again, he was just pardoned by Trump and released from prison. And this arrest warrant, which was announced on Monday night by the Attorney General of Honduras, has put the word out to Interpol. So wherever he is in the world, presumably other than the United States, they know that he is being charged with money laundering and fraud. And this is not in connection with his cocaine trafficking, but it relates to his first presidential campaign. And as the Attorney General of Honduras said, quote, "We have been wounded by the tentacles of corruption and by the criminal networks that have deeply scarred the life of our country." And this is when he announced the arrest warrant via the website formerly known as Twitter. What's really fabulous is something I didn't know was Monday the 9th was Monday the 9th or was Monday the 8th? 8th, 9th, 10th. I think Monday was, I think Tuesday, I'm sorry, this Tuesday was International Anti-Corruption Day. And wouldn't it be nice, my friends, if on next year's International Corruption Day, we had done something about the corruption in America, which would be ideally, girl can dream, impeaching Donald Trump and removing him from office. Third time's a charm, maybe. Now, again, huge trafficker of cocaine, connected, getting bribes from El Chapo. Remember that Donald Trump allowed El Chapo's family to come to the U.S. This is nuts. So again, I ain't buying it that these folks were dangerous when they were murdered. And even if they were dangerous, they could have been apprehended. The reason why they don't want to rescue anybody, they just want to send them back to anyone after that who was on these ships. They send them back to their countries or anywhere other than the U.S. because they don't want this coming out in a court of law, what is really going on here. Now, what you may know is that speaking of impeaching Donald Trump, there is going to be, and this is pretty exciting, a House vote today on the impeachment of Donald Trump. And I want to share that with you by peeking into, because over at Fox News, they seem to be kind of freaking out about this. So we've got Rep. Al Green, who I adore, from Texas, who has once again filed articles of impeachment against Donald Trump. He did that yesterday. He's doing it so it will force a vote for a floor vote in the House of Representatives on this week. So let me share that with you. Give me one moment. Here we go. So you know what's going on here. And I think I got the sound. Let's play it.
Former acting DHS Secretary and Executive Vice President of the America First Policy Institute, Chad Wolf. Chad, we know
I am not, this is not what I had wanted to share with you. So if you give me, I'm just having a slight tech issue here. I actually want the House vote information on this. And anyway, I don't have that video, but what I can tell you is that this is what this impeachment is about. He filed articles of impeachment. There's going to apparently be votes today because there's only 2 legislative days. And so I think they were filed on Wednesday. So I think the vote might be on Friday, if I have this correct. But I believe they're maybe having it today and not tomorrow. And this is his impeachment file accuses Donald Trump of calling for the execution of 6 Democratic lawmakers and making threats of violence against judges. I'm still quoting this. The former refers to Trump's reaction after Democratic lawmakers urged members of the military to refuse illegal orders. What Rep. Al Green also said was President Trump is an abuser of presidential power who, if left in office, will continue to promote violence, engender invidious hate, undermine our democracy, and dissolve our republic. Now, Green, of course, has introduced other articles of impeachment in the past, and we will see how this moves forward. Now, you should also know this isn't the only articles of impeachment that have been filed in the past few days. We had yesterday Rep. Haley Stevens, a member of Congress from Michigan, who is also now running for Senate, announced articles of impeachment against Robert F. Kennedy Jr. In connection with, let me just read this, the fact that he, quote, turned his back on science and the safety of the American people. She said Michiganders cannot take another day of his chaos. We also have, of course, my own rep in Michigan from Detroit, Rep. Sri Tanadar, and he is looking at Hegseth, arguing that his kill everybody order was unlawful and a war crime. And so he's also filed articles to impeach him. As Oprah Winfrey would say, everybody gets an impeachment. Now, before I bring my dear friend and best-selling author, Joyce Vance, up on stage, what I want to do is do Crazy Town, because I don't want to cut off my conversation with Joyce. So we are doing Crazy Town ahead of time. Are you ready? I think you might be. Let's do it. Okay. I think I made crazy eyes. Okay, so we got a couple minutes. We're just going to do Crazy Town. Crazy Town today is Nancy Mace. Now, I don't love giving this Congresswoman attention, but guys, this falls right into our lap. I can't help it. So you probably heard a few weeks ago about Nancy Mace getting into some kind of tussle. I don't mean physical, but some kind of outburst at the airport. And it a little bit is a they said, she said story to some degree. But based on what we heard initially, she was verbally abusive and cray-cray at the airport. That's all I can say without giving too many details. But now she is making the television rounds. I mean, I think what happened is it had to do with her security detail. And she got to the airport and she was supposed to be, I guess, met up she was supposed to be met when her car arrived at the airport by a security detail that would escort her from her car to her gate. Because out of fear, people are afraid of assassination. They're afraid of verbal harassment, all the rest of it. So far, seems reasonable. But apparently what happened, or allegedly, is her people told the security detail that her car was one color, but actually it was a different one. So there was a disconnect, and maybe they didn't show up, and then she threw a hissy fit. Is that gendered hissy fit? I'm sorry. So I want to show you a bit of what she's saying about this, and you'll never believe who she blames. Let's play this.
Congresswoman, the Charleston International Airport has concluded its internal investigation into an October incident where you were involved. Authorities alleged that you exhibited irate behavior while being escorted to an early morning flight. Now, Congresswoman, I know that you posted the video. I watched your video of you on the phone and then putting the phone down to screen your ticket and then walking on the flight. You say officials falsified much of a police report. What happened?
They did file a fictitious police incident report. Here's the thing, Maria. We have to take our security very seriously. If you're conservative, if you're well-known, if you have fought the transgender community like I have exponentially, in the wake of Charlie Kirk's public...
Okay. She is saying that because she has targeted the transgender community, she is at risk. Now, I'd like to share with you a video that came out of Nancy Mace not targeting the transgender community, but actually partying with them. Here we go. Sorry, guys, this is early in the morning to be showing you people engaging in some drinking game that I didn't know about when I was growing up doing drinking games, but apparently it's called baby birding. And Joyce is backstage now, and she's like, Jennifer, I wonder if she thinks, what the hell do I do on my show? I swear to you, Joyce, it's usually money, law, and snark, but this is just a little bit of a detour. But it goes to this. There she was having some fun. She drank a shot of whatever, it was beer. And then I guess you drink it and spit it into someone else's mouth. And that was a sort of non-binary person. Big deal. I mean, you know, people do this. This is from, I guess, 2017. But it seems a little hypocritical, homophobic and transphobic to be centering yourself and claiming that a police report is false. Not to say they can't be, but come on. A police report is false. She didn't have a, she did not just display inappropriate behavior. And the reason why she has to behave this way is because of transgender people. Come on, folks. Okay. Now, with no further ado, I am going to introduce my dear friend and best-selling author, Joyce Vance. This book, Giving Up is Unforgivable, is just what we need right now. We'll be talking a bit about that directly and indirectly. I also want to show today on Civil Discourse, her incredibly popular for a reason Substack. It's at joycevance.substack.com. She has a piece about Emil Bove, and I am so looking forward to her discussing this very, what I believe to be corrupt now judge who was, I'll let her talk about that. And finally, this is one of my favorite photos of Joyce and a bunch of our other friends together a few Christmases ago. Okay. Oh, Joyce, I'm so glad to see you. You look so cozy.
Good morning. It's freezing down here in my basement, so you'll forgive the faux fur, but it was the warm. I mean, it's Alabama, right? I don't have a lot of warm clothes down here, so this was it.
Joyce, you look very festive. I am wearing, it looks like just a thin sweatshirt, but I also have long underwear under my clothes because it's in the 20s in Detroit.
Twinsies.
Oh my God. So Joyce, I mean, how do we even begin? You know, your Substack is called Civil Discourse, and it's so important to me because you use that space to educate people while also educate people about why what's happening now is not normal and the sort of legal mechanisms behind this and the normative traditions. But how do you do this? What fascinates me is how do you do this without either depressing us or yourself giving up hope? Can you start there?
Well, you know, I think it's, to use a word that gets overused, I think it's unbelievably empowering to look at the facts and the law and to go through and analyze important issues that are going on, that are being blown out of proportion or represented in a lot of spaces where people get their information from. And just going through it in a very methodical way in keeping with the tradition of our training as lawyers. Jen, I chose the name Civil Discourse for this reason. I think it's really important to not get over your skis, right? It's so easy to get wrapped around the axle. These things happen. People get emotional and they throw tantrums and they turn things into something that they're not. I mean, even Donald Trump occasionally makes a reasonable argument in court, right? And so I thought it was very important to say, here's what happened. Here's the legal assessment of it. Maybe some days they have a good argument, but I think that there's a better argument on the other side. Maybe sometimes they're right. And maybe sometimes they're utterly frivolous and out of touch with legal reality. And I think when we have that baseline where we make all of those reasonable distinctions, it's easier for lay people, folks who aren't lawyers, to follow along, because none of us, we don't need to be tribal or jingoistic. We don't need to immediately go to our ideological corner and line up with, people because that's our pre-existing belief. We need to be smart, thinking, engaged citizens in a moment like this. And that's sort of my hope for what I'm doing with Civil Discourse.
And that is why you're a trusted voice. What you're saying is so important to me. I mean, there are moments, for example, when I see things, and just the other day, I'm sure you've been seeing the announcement that there might be these baby savings accounts. And I think that's actually a great idea. And the source for this, going back, is someone I know in academia, Derek Hamilton. Now, it's surprising to me that it's the Trump administration putting that forward. But that's an example. And I think we need to think about, this goes back, I'm sure you studied the book, whether you took negotiations or not, but the book Getting to Yes, which is about interest-based bargaining. What are your interests? Don't get locked into your positions, because after this administration is over, God willing, we need to be proponents of the kind of change and the kind of society people want. For me, that's shared prosperity, dignity, women's reproductive freedom. I I know what my values are. My values are anti this regime because he is a liar. I don't like to listen to someone who lies, and I don't like people who ignore court orders. And at the same time, I will say which policies this regime is putting forward that I like. And I think that's great. Now, I want to jump into some questions about some stuff in the news. Can you talk a little bit about your very popular book and what you've been doing a book tour? I'm curious, when you go on the book tour, the kinds of questions people are asking. I learn a lot when I do that.
Yeah, so this was fun. Okay, look, I'm learning that I'm supposed to do this, so I'm just trying to be a good author. Look, here's my book, Giving Up is Unforgivable, a Manual for Keeping a Democracy. I hope that y'all will read it. I know a lot of libraries have purchased.
Wait, hold it up again. Hold it up again. I like the cover.
Thank you. It's cool. It has like texture on it. I love it. My editor was truly wonderful to work with, and he did all sorts of cool things like that.
Now, I want to say one other thing. The book comes in physical form, but there are a lot of people who also or only want to listen to it. And can you tell us who is the reader?
You know, I'm the reader. I'm a huge consumer of books on Audible. I love listening to books. And it was really important to me, and my publisher very, graciously was willing to let us use a local studio in Birmingham, Alabama to record the Audible version of the book. So one of my neighbors was running the crew. It was very much a down-home experience. And I'm pretty pleased with it. I just finished listening through it on an airplane trip up and down, and I liked it. So I hope if you're interested in reading the book, you'll consider Audible.
Yes, or both. I'm a little bit of a weirdo where I like to have a hard copy of the book, but if I have to go out somewhere, I want to continue listening. So I pick up where I'm. Okay, so now let's talk about why you wrote this book when you did, and a little bit about what you think. Let me just say something. Say this the right way. A lot of people might be afraid. You're this law professor. You were a U.S. attorney. You're a quick thinker and analytical mind. Is this book that's going to be accessible to people who aren't lawyers or policy wonks?
I'm super committed to the idea of public education, because if the Trump administrations have taught me anything, it's that Americans are incredibly smart and engaged. 25 years at DOJ, nobody ever, buttonholed me in the grocery store and asked me to explain the grand jury process to them. But I've lost track of how many times somebody has asked me in a line at the grocery store or over morning coffee, tell me what the difference between an indictment and an information is. And if you give people those basic pieces of information that there's no reason that they should know, but that former federal prosecutors we take it for granted. If you share that information, then people can think through these issues on their own. Americans are incredibly smart, capable people. And the silver lining of this era is that now many Americans are engaged. And I think those conversations are valuable when you're having them with people, who you share views with, but who just want to understand better. I think that in many cases, they're even more valuable when you have those conversations with people who don't agree with you. And maybe they never will agree with you, but you can plant some seeds. And if they're reasonable, Jen, in the way that you and I were talking about, this idea of giving arguments on the other side the credibility they deserve, if you're willing to plant seeds with people, I think that they can come along. And so that really was the goal of the book. It was written as much for, friends and family members who'd fallen down the MAGA rabbit hole, who I knew would read the book. And I wanted to give them something to think about, but that was very accessible for lay people, young people, no matter who you are. I think if you're a lawyer, this book still works for you. But the goal was to write a book for Americans about civics education and democracy.
And there's a lot of things in there that I want to pull out. One thing is the human dignity aspect. To me, that is at the core of where I live. And so if I meet someone one-on-one, whether it's a student or a colleague or a family member, and they're taking a certain position, I actually want to understand where they're coming from. So I often start with data. I'm a big, love the data. I'm like, well, for example, the other day when we heard Carolyn Leavitt say that the Chinese weren't buying any soybeans from the United States. I'm like, well, let's look at those numbers. And so I see the numbers. And so if someone said and I show it on this, on the show, but if I had a family member or someone saying, well, that happened, I would say, that's so interesting because I was curious when I heard that statement. And here's what the data I saw. Can you help me understand what you're thinking? And it's respect. And sometimes it's someone who hasn't thought it through and they're in a place where you don't want to embarrass them. You want to give them this opportunity. Now, second thing, you said people like to know the difference between an information and an indictment. I cannot leave that hanging. Can you tell? Of course, I know, but I'm sure there are folks listening wondering, what is she talking about? Can you explain that?
This is such a great thing to know because during the Biden administration, we saw a lot of informations. If you go to a grand jury, I'm the prosecutor. I go to the grand jury. I convince them that there's probable cause to indict. The grand jury foreperson signs off on an indictment, and that's the document that charges the defendants with whatever crimes, the grand jury has signed off on. An information is different. Prosecutors can charge a defendant if that defendant agrees to be charged without going to the grand jury. And we call that an information. It almost always means that that defendant has agreed in advance to plead guilty to the charges that the information contains. Saw that a lot during the Biden administration. That's something that I used with regularity for 25 years. Not seeing a whole lot of that in this revenge agenda that Donald Trump is pursuing. I assume it's still working the way it's supposed to with all the prosecutors across the country, God bless them, who are just trying to do their jobs and keep the American people safe. But this revenge agenda, the revenge docket of prosecutions, is something entirely, different and vermished.
Vermish, a little Yiddish. I'm going to do a follow-up question. So now that folks know the difference between an information that usually accompanies a plea deal and an indictment, which does not, can you tell us, because I think this is pretty cool, about the sandwich guy? Because the sandwich guy, Jeanine Pirro, couldn't get an indictment for the felony, but he was still charged without a grand jury. So tell folks what went down there, please.
Yeah, so under the Constitution, federal prosecutors must go to a grand jury to charge a felony. And when the grand jury in the District of Columbia, said no dice, not going for a felony in this case, this is the guy who threw the sandwich at the agent who was making the effort to arrest him at a protest. And apparently he threw it so hard that the sandwich was on the ground with its wrapper still intact. And in the charging document, the agent actually lied about the condition of the sandwich. Oh, the agent had it all over him. And, that just wasn't the case.
Yeah, on the stand, he didn't say that, right?
Yeah, that might explain why they had trouble in the grand jury. Grand jurors, too, are very smart at discerning the evidence. But so the Constitution doesn't say you have to go to a grand jury to charge a misdemeanor. And that's what prosecutors in the District of Columbia did. They charged a misdemeanor, and that was what they proceeded on.
So, folks, I think you've learned something new. And Joyce is talking about the federal level. So don't try this at home. And, state courts have different, we have 50 states, laboratories of democracy, right? And so sometimes they differ.
Can we just say, fun fact, grand jury is one of the very few requirements that the courts and Congress have not imposed on the state. Most of the constitutionally compelled rights that have to do with the criminal justice system apply in the states. Grand jury doesn't. And so there are a handful, maybe 5 or 6 states that don't require but permit a grand jury. Every place else, though, it's obligatory.
So you got that. I feel smarter already, Joyce. Now,
this is stuff I know. I really enjoy. This isn't like existential crisis. The world is coming to an end. It feels so good to talk about real things.
Well, Joyce, how this is exam season, and I didn't send you my exam to proofread, but I've got to tell you, I had so much fun writing my exam. The students in my corporations class get a hypothetical ahead of time, but when you come to the exam day, they get the questions I want to ask about it. I'm saying this so that if
I
anyone
love
hears
that
this.
idea. I'm going to steal that. That's brilliant.
Let me show you. I'm going to send you this exam so I can show you the kinds of questions I asked. So it wouldn't be something they would entirely anticipate, but maybe, right?
I'm sad you didn't let me proofread this year. We used to do that. Let's do that again.
We should. Don't proofread it now because it's out. It's the registrar. But I decided to come up with. I was like, what should I always like to start with a business that evolves and then gets into certain legal issues that we have studied. And so this year, my business was called, instead of the show Breaking Bad, so I could use the names of those characters, I called it Breaking Sad, as in the seasonal affective disorder. And I was cracking up. The product they were selling was a lamp and snacks and some app. But law professors can be really annoying. You've done Harry Potter, right? We try to laugh about.
I did Harry Potter. I did the murder of Albus Dumbledore. It's the best exam I've ever done. I use it as my in-class example now because it's always fun.
Yeah. I do love teaching. It is fun. Okay. So let's talk about today on the front page. I want to go to, of course, I just took this down. This slide. Okay, here we go. This is the front page today of Civil Discourse. I've kind of moved the pieces around here, but you have an article called Judicial Ethics. Yesterday, Third Circuit Court of Appeals Judge Emil Bove attended an event where Donald Trump spoke. Can you tell us why you decided to write this up and give us some context?
Yeah, so, Emil Bove, I think it's important to start out by saying he's no Lindsay Halligan, right? He's not an insurance lawyer who was dropped into the Justice Department and then the federal judiciary with no experience. This is an experienced prosecutor, U.S. attorney's offices in New York, serious cases, lots of experience, understands the ground rules. And Bove, who was Donald Trump's lawyer, became one of the folks on the landing team that went to the Justice Department and was involved, as many of y'all will be aware, in, among other things, the deportation case that Judge Boasberg in the District of Columbia currently is pursuing contempt proceedings in because of Bove's involvement in giving some of the advice as the planes were flying towards El Salvador.
Oh, right.
Yeah, but Trump appoints Bove to the Third Circuit Courts of Appeals, one of the 11 federal geographic circuits. And so once you become a federal judge, you have certain obligations that normal people don't have. They're defined in the federal canons of judicial ethics. We've talked about this a lot, right, Jen? Because there are no ethical canons for Supreme Court justices, but the courts of appeals and the district judges are obligated to follow them. And look, I'm not just talking theoretically here. Let me just establish some bona fides and say my father-in-law sat on the 11th Circuit. You might think that the ethical canons applied only to him. Not the case. They were something that my mother-in-law was acutely aware of, and to a lesser extent, my husband and myself, who, although we were involved in local politics, we were very careful to think through our participation because we knew it reflected on my father-in-law, who, although he came out of politics, was the head of the Alabama Democratic Party, set that aside and never went to another political event after the day he went on the bench.
That's
the job.
Incredible,
right?
That's the job. And it's giving up not just politics, but those friendships, those communities. He knew the assignment in the values.
And they all do. I mean, it's like every appellate judge, district judge understands they don't get to do that stuff anymore. And so look, the judicial canons of ethics say no political involvement, but then there's this important catch-all that says you shouldn't do anything improper and you shouldn't do anything that has even the appearance of impropriety, because it's so important for the public to have confidence in the integrity of the judiciary that judges have to go above and beyond the call of duty to protect the institution that they serve in. So right. Emil Bove goes to a speech that Donald Trump gives. And Bove, when I think it's Von Hilliard at MS Now, who is there covering it and looks up and says, oh, there's Judge Bove, and asks him off camera, hey, what are you doing here? And he says, well, I'm just here as a private citizen.
Okay.
And so that's an argument that he can make, apparently with a straight face. But, it's not It's not an argument, I think, that serves this goal of preserving the integrity of the judiciary. I was told explicitly in the first training session that I had in Washington for new U.S. attorneys, you no longer have a public or you no longer have a private capacity. You serve the American people 24/7. That meant, we could, I mean, my husband is an elected state court judge. We couldn't have a sign for anybody, including Bob, in our front yard.
Incredible.
Bumper stickers on our cars. I mean, that's just as a, you're in place for 4 years U.S. attorney. Federal judges have life tenure.
It doesn't inspire confidence in our system if you believe there's one set of laws for people in your in-group and a different set for the so-called out-group.
You've just got to demonstrate neutrality so that people can have confidence, which isn't easy for some people to have confidence in courts and prosecutors. And, the problem, and I understand what Judge Bove's saying, it may be that a judicial ethics panel will give him a pass. Although the weird thing about these judicial ethics complaint proceedings is that they're all done privately. You can't go back and find old opinions. So you only know about them if you know by word of mouth. But I am familiar with one where a judge accompanied his wife to a political event. Somebody made a complaint and it was not dismissed. There was an investigation and he was sort of censured for doing it and told never to do it again. And that was, he literally just took his wife to something and stayed outside. This is, I think, degrees more serious. I don't know how the chief judge of the Third Circuit, to whom complaints about it will go, will handle it. But what disturbs me about this is that having only very recently become a judge, having been appointed by a president whose private lawyer he was with all of these swirling accusations about contempt in the deportation case, it might have been nice to keep his powder dry. And I think somebody exercising good judgment would not have gone. And that, I think, is the concern here, is that he apparently thought it was okay to be sort of in your face. Maybe he thought nobody would recognize him. But dude, I mean, your face has been all over every paper and every, computer screen in the country. And it does feel a little bit in keeping with the attitude of this administration, which is laws for thee, but not for me.
And, when the reason why, as you spoke about a bit earlier, that his face is so well known is because of the investigation into his open defiance of court orders. And we go back to this thing that he apparently said, which is, the judges can F themselves, right? I mean, can you talk a little bit about that?
Right. This is, so the planes are flying to El Salvador, to CCOT prison with, I think, 200 or 300, I've lost track, Venezuelans who are being deported to this notorious terrorist prison
in the spring. This was like in the spring of this year, with the first plane. Yeah. And there was it was an emergency hearing over the weekend, and then a Monday hearing where the judge said, I don't want any planes to go.
Yeah,
and there's a question about whether they were in the air or not. Yeah, go ahead.
Over the weekend, the ACLU's lead lawyer on the immigration cases, Legal Alert, files an emergency petition. They go to court. They're in court for a prolonged period of time. The planes, I think, have already taken off or are taking off as the hearing starts. And the judge issues a verbal order and says, make them come back, or prohibits the government from turning these people over into Salvadoran custody. And so at that point, that doesn't happen. We know a little bit more than we knew at the time, because Kristi Noem, the DHS secretary, has now filed a declaration with the court saying that she gave the order. Emil Bove has filed a declaration with the court saying, I gave privileged legal advice, which is sort of a way of saying, come and get me. I ain't going to tell you voluntarily. But there is sworn testimony from a whistleblower, a former DOJ lawyer named Erez Ruveni, who, by the way, is not a crazy liberal. He's somebody who worked in immigration for the Trump Justice Department during the entire first administration, so was involved in the implementation of the family separation policy. But here he is now. They go a bridge too far with this notion of disobeying court orders. And so Ruvani testifies to something that Emma Bove says is not true. So just to be very clear, Ruvani says that I think before the hearing happens, Bove is talking with some of the immigration lawyers about what the government's strategy will be. And he says words to the effect, I don't have the exact quote, although it's in my Substack column from last night, but he says, you know, it may be that we'll have to disobey a quarter and just say F you to the courts,
Right.
which is just an utterly shocking I'm just telling you, I've been in.
It gives me the chills, Joyce. I mean, I can't even believe it. I can't even
Justice
believe it.
Department
Yeah.
conversations about federal judges who issued orders that we really, really, really strongly objected to. And, you know, we never once said, fuck the courts. What we said was, let's call the Solicitor General and get permission to appeal. I mean, that's what Justice Department lawyers are supposed to do.
And what I'm going to make another pitch for the book is Joyce explains from the outset the legal and historical underpinnings for judicial independence, going back to this case Marbury versus Madison. Then she brings it to the 50s, Youngstown, and so on. I mean, this is stuff that I learned in law school, but there's a way that Joyce speaks of this, and I want to assign this to every first-year law student because it gives them this context about, you know, executive authority and where we are. Now, Joyce, I've got a surprise for you.
Oh, no.
Come over here. My Auntie Linda is in town. Come over here, sweetie. You want to come to this side. And she wants to say hello to you. She can't do it in person. Come over, honey.
Hi, Auntie Linda. How are you?
Hi, Joyce.
Oh, she can't hear you because here, put this into your ear, one ear.
Okay. Oh God, I hope your ears
Oh, my ears are clean, Linda.
better have clean ears. Jeez, Louise.
Now can you hear Joyce?
Okay,
Hey,
Joyce.
how are you?
Hi, Joyce. Oh, you look so terrific. Look at you. You're nice and cozy. Really, and I have long under. I'm from the right kind of the country, the correct kind of the country. I am from Northern California.
Oh yeah,
and Saratoga. So that's 50. Pardon me.
She said no kidding.
I used to go to summer camp up in that area when I was a kid.
Yes, you did, because everybody went.
Yeah.
We went there. Anyway, so I'm glad that you were there. It was a great camp. It was Camp Swig.
I went to Swig. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. I might have been your counselor. Who knows? At any rate, 50 miles south of San Francisco, and we are just nestled right there. So we're very happy. And I love you, and I love what you do, and I subscribe to your Substack.
And you listen to Sisters-in-Law.
Oh, I do. Nice. I do. And she's my niece-in-law. We're so I'm her mom's sister. I'm the baby.
Got it.
And I still act like one too.
I love all of
princess
family.
No.
She's anti-chaos. She creates utter chaos. I clean the place for her, and it's like all her shit everywhere. Okay.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
That
was so sweet.
I'm not going to give it back to you.
Yes, it's so great having her here, and she just adores you. So, well, Joyce, any final words for folks, just generally about? I'm coming back to the mental health, physical health, emotional health, coping aspect. As lawyers, we know with litigation, cases take a long time. How do we maintain our patience, but also not get complacent and I mean this, not so much in a hit the streets way, but just in the how do we face reality and also be okay?
Yeah, I mean, it's really a hard question, right? It's I jokingly said, I think you were in the room when I said this, that when Joe Biden went to office, he needed a cabinet level agency for Americans' mental health. After we survived the first Trump presidency, I think mental health is going to have to be elevated after this. But look, seriously, if there's one lesson that I've learned from being in Birmingham and getting to interact with people in the civil rights community, not just the really tremendous civil rights leaders that we're blessed with, but the foot soldiers, the people who marched and the people who protested, it's that you need to be in community when you're dealing with serious. So I think what you're doing, Jen, is utterly amazing. If people are watching and they're not already subscribed to Jen's YouTube channel, you absolutely should subscribe. getting together in the morning, getting this shot of information, and just being together to learn. For me, that's become very essential. I could not do this without my online community. I treasure my in-person friends. I love my online community too. We will somehow or another get through this, all of us together.
And I love that. That's your sign off, isn't it? We're in this together.
Yes.
Joyce, thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule and going down into your cold basement to be with us. We call ourselves Prism Mates, as in PRISM. And what that stands for, I don't know if you know, here, I'll share this with you. Physical health, relational health, intellectual health, spiritual health, and mental health. We're not in a prison, we're in a prism. And I don't know if you, I want to show you our mascot for the show. It's Tank, the tortoise. And here is Tank. Where are you, Tank? Here's Tank. Tank, our tortoise.
That's amazing. I love that.
Well, thank you. Have a wonderful day and weekend. If I don't, well, I'll probably see you somewhere in a chat.
Yes.
But
inevitably,
unfortunately. No, I'm kidding. Hopefully that Amazon order comes to you and you can tell me more about it later today.
Love you, Jen. Thanks so much for having me on. I just want to note that I'm the last person in our friend group that you invited onto your YouTube channel. So I'm glad I finally made the cut, girl.
You know, last but not least, honey.
Love you. Have a good week.
Love you too. Okay,
Bye.
guys, have a beautiful, bye, Joyce. Have a beautiful, beautiful weekend. It was so great to have Joyce here and Auntie Linda. And let me share with you, Auntie Linda and I going out to dinner last night. And then this is a great mural. It says vote. And if you can see if you're facing this image on the left is Linda pointing at the mural, and vote is our theme today. Love you guys. See you tomorrow.
Hello, Prism Mates. It's the Jen Taub Show. Well, how come everyone? Let's learn about what is happening in politics yesterday and today. There was hope, and we are together in this democracy we work for. And again, welcome to the Jen Taub Show. Do 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 do.